and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here in Westborough. If you haven't seen this show before, my name is Art Bergeron. My day job is as an elder law attorney right here in Westborough at Myrick O'Connell. But this is not about my day job. If you've seen one of my presentations, I always talk about my friends Frank and Mary and their goal in life, which is to live in their house until they die and be buried in the backyard. And if you identify with that, as a senior who just kind of wants to stay here, the point of this show is to help you know, among other things, the programs that you need to know in order to stay right here in Westborough. But my friend Shelby Marshall and I have really tried to broaden that to include things that you, among other people, should know about because you're a resident of Westborough. So some people know me. Everybody knows Shelby Marshall, who has been with us. We've been doing this for a long time now, and Shelby's been on the Board of Selectmen for a long time. So Shelby? Yeah. Shelby always finds the great guests. I just kind of provide comic relief. Shelby, whom do we have today?
Yeah, so we're joined today by Mark Silverberg. Mark is the chair of the planning board. He's been a past guest, prior guest, on Frank and Mary. And today we're going to talk about the Community Preservation Act. But before we do that, I'd just like to issue an editorial correction to our 2 shows ago. So 2 shows ago, we had Mr. Jonathan Hostage on our show. He's a Republican running for the representative seat here in Westborough, one of 2 seats that's up for election. And we had an editorial error. We had posted his contact information. We had the wrong phone number. So I want to issue an apology to Mr. Hostage. We do have an image that has been circulating thanks to the editorial crew here behind the scenes. And that correct number, if you want to reach Mr. Hostage, is 617-212-8461. And again, apologies and appreciation to Westborough TV for posting that PSA correction so that viewers can reach Mr. Hostage. And I wish him good luck in his campaign. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, now.
So with that in mind,
yep.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about the Community Preservation Act.
Oh, excuse me. Yep. I'm just going to mention to our friends at Westborough Cable,
yep.
just in case, I've got a clock that's not running right now, and I just want to make sure we've timed the show right so that we can. Right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's anticipating me to gab too much, I think.
Well, but no. It's more us than you.
Just met me
it's more us than you.
Right. Well, we love it. We're all of us bring different perspectives to this topic. So. So Mark and I served on the Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee, which was a committee appointed by the Select Board to research bringing, whether or not it's feasible, reasonable, and appropriate to bring the Community Preservation Act to Westborough. That committee met for just over a year, returned its final report, which is available through the town's website. In January. And so the Select Board heard that, voted on it. Other boards, committees, including Finance Committee, voted on that. We brought it to town meeting as is part of the process in the spring of 2022. It was soundly approved by the town meeting, our legislative body. And so the next step in that process is that it's on the ballot. So for those that have already gone, maybe you want to fast forward past the show. But if you haven't voted yet, you want to listen to this show and understand what CPA is and how it can benefit Westborough. So just to be clear, it's on the November ballot. It's question 5. And a vote yes will bring CPA to Westborough, and a vote no will not, and then we can't revisit that for about 5 years. So with that, let's talk about what CPA is. We got a couple slides here to help the viewers along because we'll talk about some numbers. And CPA, if you've never heard of it, you might think it's something to do with accounting, and it's not.
Is it my accountant?
Yes. Right. So the CPA is a state-established piece of legislation. And actually, Arthur, you've got some historical context here on the act.
I named it. I named it the Community Preservation Act because my cousin, who was at that time the state senator, was the original kind of creator of this, which passed in 2021.
2001.
Excuse me, in 2001. And so, by the way, to provide a little bit of context, I called him this morning.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to be on TV in Northborough. Can you just
Westborough.
I might have said Northborough. That's a bad thing, right? When
I
was talking to him. So tell me, I said to Bob, so can you give me a sense of how much money has been raised and spent at this point on the Community Preservation Act? He said a little over $3 billion.
Yeah.
And I said, about how much of that has been state money? He said, well, about half, a little more than half.
Yeah, yeah.
So, which is by way of saying that over the last 21 years, many communities except Northborough, right, have shared over $1.5 billion in state money that has come to a whole bunch of other places. So that's my that's my context.
Just to start out, Arthur, when you say state money, it's money that's generated from fees paid at the registry. So it's really our money. It's money that people in Westborough have already paid into this fund, but so far we've gotten no benefit from it. Other towns who've adopted CPA, Grafton, for example, adopted CPA very early, and I believe they've generated over $6 million.
Wow.
And
a big number.
I don't know exactly how much of that was state money, but it certainly
typically over half.
It's
Particularly for the early adopters.
So
go ahead.
so it's really something that we've already spent money on. Anybody who does any business at the registry, whether it's buying a house or recording a plan or an easement, has to pay a fee, and those fees go into a big pool of state money, and that's what they use to develop a match. So you know, the town of Westborough, we're recommending. This is where the numbers get complicated, but basically it's going to work out to about a $50 surcharge on your taxes for the average tax bill. That goes into a fund that's monitored by a committee set up by the town, but that fund gets matched every year by the state. Last year it was 40%. So it's almost like we're saving for the future, but we're getting a 40% return on our savings. And that's the way.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, so many times we get these projects at town meeting and we approve them, and then we have to figure out how to pay for them, and it's awfully nice from my point of view to think that we are actually putting money away to buy to pay for something in the future, and getting money from the state to help us, and B, not having to borrow as much when we actually go do it.
Or not having to just defer it, you know, or say we can't do this. I think one of the things that we've really come to appreciate is how many great projects over the last 21 years got bought that simply wouldn't have got bought because it's real estate. Things show up, and the seller isn't like, well, you know, things are I want to sell. That's the reason it's on the market. I want to sell, and so I don't have 2 years. I don't have, you know, I need the money. And for towns especially to go through town meeting and do all this stuff, unless the money's there.
Well, just so you know, the money still has to be approved by town meetings. It's not like this new committee can just go out and spend this money. Any project that wants to use CPA funds has to get approved. That has to get approved at town meetings. So I look at it as projects that would get approved anyway, but so the town meeting would have to vote on it and approve it, but instead of borrowing or appropriating to pay, we can dip into this pool of money, and again, the state money is under local control, right? As opposed to applying for a grant from the state or the federal grant that has all sorts of criteria that may limit what we can do with the grant money. We actually have a pool of money that is under our control, that we have discretion as a town how to spend, and that to me is so important because I see so much, I don't want to say interference, but that's probably the right word, from the state on how local municipalities can spend their money.
So I think I'm going to just back up a minute, and we do have a slide up for our viewers. So just for context, so CPA is CPA funds, whether they be state or local, can be used for very specific purposes: affordable housing, open space and recreation, and historic preservation. And then, as with any legislation, there's details under that which specifies what you can do in terms of renovation versus new construction, et cetera, et cetera. But the point here is that these are all elements of the quality of life here in Westborough that residents want, and that we want to build, develop, or preserve. And this gives us an opportunity. We don't have to spend the money every year, so we would collect. So what has been proposed and what's on the ballot is a 0.5%, so 0.5%, which is the lowest amount that you can have and adopt as part of your bylaws, that in order to get the state match. So it's a 0.5%, as Mark already mentioned. It's about $50 estimated based on the average household here in Westborough. We have also adopted 2 exemptions that apply equally to both residential and commercial. And by the way, the commercial sector will pay into this as well. It's not just residents. And that exemption is for both low and middle income as well as seniors. So people can, so it's automatically, it would be applied. It's $100,000, and it comes off of the value, the taxed real estate valuation. So I'm not going to get into the details. We don't have that on the slide because it sort of gets.
Well, okay, so
go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So let's say you pay $9,000. The average house in town pays
Yeah,
about $9,000 a year in taxes.
Kind of a real example.
Right.
$9,000.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, we're not going to go
But
there.
we're not going to go there. No.
We can save that for a whole nother show.
That's right.
But the first thing you do is take $100,000 off of your valuation, so that reduces that $9,000.
Right.
Let's say you pay $9,000 on a $500,000 house.
Yeah.
Well, if your valuation that's used for this goes down to $400,000, even though your assessment is $500,000.
Right.
So the number that's used isn't the $9,000; it'd be around $8,000. All right. Now the town has the discretion, and we opted for Shelby said the lowest possible number. So out of that, so you take that $8,000 that is left after you reduce the $100,000, and multiply it by 0.5, and you get around $40 a year.
It's just 0.5% of
That
the
would be
8,000. Right.
that would be a surcharge.
Right.
And that amount will fluctuate, just to be clear, year over year because of the valuation of homes. So
Sure.
that's not a static number. It's a percent based on the calculation Mark just shared.
But if you're a senior, or if you're a low income, you can apply for an exemption from that surcharge. All right. So that would make it, I don't want to say more affordable, but people that would really have trouble with it can get out of paying that surcharge.
And for purposes of the folks who are watching our show, typically our Frank and Marys are 100% seniors according to some definitions. So the question is, what's the definition of senior for purposes of this? And B, if you're a senior, are you simply out by virtue of being a senior?
You do have to apply.
And you have to apply. But are there any other income criteria? Do you have to apply and show not only that you're a senior, but that you are a really financially struggling
Well,
senior?
there's a low income exemption for anybody.
And I knew that was there, but I didn't know if you were a senior.
But I believe the senior exemption, I'd have to look that up for you.
If it was just by virtue of being a senior. And maybe we can just try to ask our folks here to do a blurb or something that has that, when this will get shown.
Yeah, I just don't want to give you bad information.
We can even update that other slide just to be more specific about the exemption and who it applied to.
Great idea.
So that money would go into the fund. Everybody would get money from the state. The town would set up a committee to monitor that fund. Every year you could apply to that committee for funding for a project. So the open space committee, let's say there's a piece of open space we want to buy, or the library could apply because it's a historic building. They could apply for some funding to do historic preservation. If you wanted to build a dog park or improve some playing fields or
Splash pad.
Yeah, the splash pad might be an option. So all of those, projects are eligible, but I don't look at it as, we heard the Advisory Finance Committee talk at town meeting about the town has needs and they have wants. Well, the town still has discretion over what we need to spend that money on. It's not like it's going to be frivolously spent. It's going to be monitored by town meeting ultimately.
I think that's an interesting way of thinking of that distinction, though, because I think whenever you're at town meeting, the argument is, well, we have needs and we have wants.
Yeah.
Well, the way that wants turn in, or that needs get knocked out and turned into wants is because you're short on money.
Sure.
Like everybody's got things that they really want, right? But do you really, really want it? Because you're really short on money. So what's wonderful about this is that you have this kind of savings account that's been building up, right? From which you can say, well, you know, we're now in a position, we've been saving up for this.
Right. Well, and that's a great segue. If we can, if Aidan can pull up that next slide, just kind of as a, if we looked at FY22, so had this already passed and we applied the surcharge, this is an estimate of what would have happened. So we would have raised through our own tax dollars about $335,000. We would have received about a third of that, 131 from the state. So in 1 year, we would have generated $466,000 to benefit the components that are covered under CPA. Again, we don't have to spend that. We could say, geez, we know we have X project coming down the road. This is, you know, and so, and communities that have adopted this have done that. I mean, they've put, you know, they have little projects, you know, we're going to, you know, preserve some gravestones, right? Really important.
Splash pad.
Right. It might be smaller, but there are others that have said, you know, we know, you know, CPA is going to contribute $1 million to this. And if we think about the price tag, to Mark's point, about the library project that just was defeated at town meeting, what could that impact have been if it was like the Library Foundation is committing this, CPA is committing this, the state is committing this from the library, from the MBLC, and so taxpayer net to you, this is this, and oh, by the way, because of all of this, your cost, your interest on borrowing is that much less.
Is that much lower.
Right, so it just, again, I think that there's a fear that there are going to be all these projects like springing up from the ground that we never would have approved, and that may be true in some communities. I don't think that's true here in Westborough, but I do think that there's an element that there are some of these smaller projects that we just kind of go, yeah, we just can't do it. Or we know we need to do it, but we really want to fund, I mean, at one of our most recent town meetings, or before town meeting, we, as I recall, we rolled off like an incremental amount of hours at the senior center for for additional staff.
Yep.
What if we had allocated that, and don't recall the number, but it was small. It was like $5,000-$10,000. What if we could have done that as part of kind of the updated budget, and that 5 or 10 that we maybe allocated to one of these type of projects could have come from CPA funding? So it's a win-win. It's a win-win for about $50 a year.
Yeah, it's like a cost of a cup of coffee a week. So,
but by the way, to give you another kind of a real life example from the other town that I mentioned, from Northborough, there is no question in my mind. One of my colleagues is actually on the CPA committee in Northborough, because they adopted the CPA a number of years ago. There is no question in my mind that the White Cliffs would not have been saved.
True.
Would not have been saved without CPA money.
Yeah, and Northborough built affordable housing with that money. Grafton's purchased open space. They've done historic preservation on a number of buildings. They've done recreational parks and fields. So,
Hopkinton enhanced a park with ADA. That's actually one of the projects underway now, improving their accessibility in their bathrooms at one of their beaches. So, you know, all of this, you know, there's similarity. I mean, let me back up. 189 communities have already adopted this here in the Commonwealth, and Westborough is not one of them.
Right.
So.
But what's handy, as you just pointed out, is these aren't communities far away. This is like neighboring communities.
Yeah, sure.
So you can actually say, well, you know why that happened, right?
And we're competitive here.
It was because of CPA.
That's
right.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the town in like 2001 had the foresight to put a bunch of money into the open space fund, and that money grew. Right. And in the last 3 years, we bought 30 acres on Belknap Road. We bought 60 acres across on Eli Whitney. Yep. You know, if we hadn't had that money saved, we would have had to borrow money to buy those.
Right.
Or not done the project.
Right.
Well, now that fund is empty.
Right.
Right. So the next big piece of land that
Right.
comes up that the town, may be interested in preserving as open space, keeping it from getting developed by,
Someone.
someone. We all know the demand for real estate in Westborough. Yeah.
Or if we wanted to acquire it and use it for development of affordable housing or something, some combination thereof, there are options.
Yeah.
So again, I look at this for a community that has done an exceptional job of managing its finances and putting this community in strong financial position, which allows us to borrow at lower rates. We know how important that is now. We have sound capital planning processes. We have departments that are looking 5 and 10 years out. This is a planning tool and it's an investment tool in our future. And I just and I'm a huge advocate of it. I was on, as I mentioned, on the Exploratory Committee, but we're not alone in that. And on one of the slides, if Aidan could just pull that back up again, I just want to make the point that the CPA was one of the core goals of the master plan. Mark really chaired that whole effort along with several other individuals in the community. And so that was a goal. We adopted the master plan, bringing CPA as part of that, or an expectation of that. Adoption was supported by the Finance Committee, right? They're often the harshest,
harshest critics.
You got to pass the bar, with them. Open Space, Recreation, Historical, the Westborough Affordable Housing Trust has unanimously supported this, and more and more. And the Community Land Trust is a private entity. So. We're not just sort of up here, kind of holding the sign and saying, yes, vote on 5. This is good for Westborough.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, there's people who are going to look at it like, they're going to say it's a tax and I don't want to pay more taxes. And, that's all well and good, but I wish I could get 40% back on all my taxes, right? I mean, we just heard that the state has to give back 13% of our taxes or something like that because we have a budget surplus, and, right? And we're all jumping for joy. Well, this is 40%, and it then gets under local control, which is so big, I think.
Right. And so just on the local control piece, just to emphasize that, so there are a lot of folks who are like, well, that can just change. They're just saying that, right? No, so that's part of the bylaw. It's a requirement, regardless of your percentage that you adopt. This bylaw, if it is adopted, cannot change. So we can't come back, someone can't come back next year and say, well, we adopted it, let's raise it to 1%. No. That can't happen. It has to be on the books for 5 years, and then, if the town wanted to change it, they could.
Yeah, but it would have to go through the same process.
Yes.
It can't just be the select board says, we're going to change it and raise it to 3%.
Right.
It has to go back to town meeting, and I believe it has to go back on the ballot.
Oh, yes. No,
So
it absolutely does.
So it's not easy to change, and it's not easy to go up. And the committee was very concerned about, there was actually a lot of sentiment to go to a higher percentage.
In the community.
Right. And yeah, a lot of people, we did a lot of outreach on this, and there was quite a large group, that wanted to do an even higher percentage, but the committee was very sensitive to that and chose the lowest possible percentage. Because we still think it'll generate substantial revenue, important revenue that we can use, for a number of.
And if I can just kind of add one thing kind of politically, this is also to provide historical context.
Sure.
This was on Marlborough's ballot maybe 8 or 9 years ago and failed by about 100 votes, and never came back again. And never
on
came
the
back.
ballot, so
on
it
the
passed
ballot.
through your town meeting process. Yep.
Failed on the ballot, right? So if it and there's quite a bit of history of context around the state to that. If it's on the ballot and fails, most communities will never do it again, right? So don't think, right? If you lose this opportunity, you may be losing this opportunity for a long, long time. Just because once the political momentum is, once you've lost, and you've had this, you've had an advisory committee, and you've done all this work, and you've tried to figure it out, and then you've lost. So who wants to bring that up again? So it's like really, this is the time to do it. If you're going to be doing it, if you're going to do it, it's been 21 years now, right? If you're going to do it, this is within the next 10 to 15 years, it's probably now.
I just think it's financially responsible, and I know people may not agree with that, but to me, I try to put something away every week for, either
When
my
you get to be as
kids
old
or
as me.
for, in case the furnace goes
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
I mean, it's a rainy day fund. And, in this case, what we're spending it on is projects that the town would vote for anyway. They have to go to town meeting. They have to get approved by town meeting. And if town meeting approves it, where's the money coming from? Is it going to be money we've already put aside, that we've got money helping us from the state, or is it going to be, let's raise taxes to pay for it then, or let's borrow more?
Right, which ultimately is an increase anyway, right?
I'm not a huge fan of borrowing unless we really have to.
Right,
I feel
right.
like the advantage to this is that it will accumulate every year. We don't have to spend it every year. It'll go up pretty quickly to the point where the next big open space purchase or playing fields or splash pads, maybe we can
money's
just
gonna
pay
be
for it out of money we've already put aside.
And to go to your point about intra, I think that's probably what we have read more about over the last 3 or 4 months, right, has been the fact that the era of low borrowing rates is over. Is over could potentially for a long time. So
And
this
that's-
notion of, oh, well, we can just go bond this, we're going to pay 1%, 2%.
Yeah.
Guess what?
No, it's
That could
not.
be 3 times that.
Yep.
This
Sure.
is for a long time.
Right.
Right?
So just a couple of quick points. So sort of looking ahead and thinking that this will pass, those that might be on the fence might say, well, what happens and who controls it? So Mark touched on this, but I just want to kind of speak to a couple elements. One is every year, even if you don't spend it, the funds collected must be at a minimum allocated 10%, 10%, 10% to the 3 categories that we mentioned: affordable, open space recreation, and historic preservation. So within the Community Preservation Act fund that the town would hold, there would be, think of it like 3 different savings accounts within that. And that money has to be allocated that way. So for those that are thinking, oh, the cynic that says, this is really just a chance, we don't need any more open space, we don't need any more fields and whatever. That's not how this works. There's a minimum. Now, the Community Preservation Committee, which I'll touch on in a minute, can choose to allocate more in a given year, maybe in anticipation of projects coming up, but they don't have to. So it's 10% there, 5% if you were administering the fund, if you needed that, and then the balance can kind of play across those 3 buckets. As for the Community Preservation Committee, that has a required membership. So I'm going to just refer to my notes here. You'd need a member of the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, Historical Commission, Housing Authority, and the Board of Parks and Commissioners. And being that we don't have that, that could be that there's some play there as to who that would be, more like a recreation type representative.
Yeah, I don't know if that got confusing. It confused me a little bit, that earmark piece. But let's say you have $100,000 in the fund, and somebody comes in and wants to buy, the town wants to buy open space with that $100,000. You can't get the whole $100,000 that's in the fund. 10,000 of it has to be earmarked for historic preservation. 10,000 has to be earmarked for affordable housing.
Right.
So the most
Of that.
most of that committee could recommend to town meeting to spend would be 80 out of the 100 on one of the 3 categories.
Right.
So every year, each of those categories will be earmarked, 10% to accumulate in the funds for when their turn comes up to use that money.
In the committee itself, there's a lot of structure around what the Community Preservation Committee has to do on an annual basis. And my parallel, although it's not exact, is Westborough Affordable Housing Trust. So they have very strict requirements. They have to provide a report. They have to meet as a board. They have, their meetings are public, so on and so on. So all of that applies here too. There would be a cycle process for grant review. I believe it can be up to 2 grant allocations that would align with our annual town meeting and special fall town meeting. But that would be up to the committee to determine. So, yeah.
So you guys have done an incredible job on this, right? And congratulations that it came through town meeting, right?
Yeah.
I guess, and I would just urge people.
Oh, can I just say, Aiden's going to pull up additional resources. So if folks want to read the report, they can do that.
Yep.
Also providing an example, one of the best Community Preservation Act websites I've seen out there is Yarmouth, and some of how they have explained their process and how they share information. And then the Community Preservation Coalition has a projects database. So that information is on the screen. Folks can go to that, and I'm more than happy at any point to share those links directly.
And it's just terrific that the both of you have undertaken this. This is obviously a gigantic task, right?
Oh, we're not the only ones. There was a lot of people that worked on this. I don't want to take all that credit. So.
Clearly,
yeah,
clearly. And so look, even if it's not for you, just to tell them, oh, thank you for doing all this work. Go vote and vote for this. You know, I mean, it's $50 a year. Give me a break. But I think it's just a wonderful initiative. This kind of opportunity doesn't come along very often, right? Yep. So if you're at all sympathetic to this, the case is pretty strong. There have been a lot of support for it. If you've got questions, though, go talk to these folks.
Yeah.
Okay?
So it's on the ballot. It's question number 5. And if you want this to pass and the town to adopt this, you should vote yes. I hope you will.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you both.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both. Thank you, Mark. Shelby, always a pleasure.
As we like to say, that's a wrap.
And folks, we'll look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Frank and Mary here in Westborough. Thank you very much.